Welcome everybody to Lobby Locally, Fighting PH through District Visits. We're going to learn a little bit today about why making face-to-face visits with members of Congress is so important and impactful in the fight against PH, and a little bit about how to make those visits, how to get started, and some tips from a couple of district visit veterans who are on the call. Our presenter today is Gavin Lindberg, and Gavin, welcome Gavin. Gavin has been PHA's Washington representative for many years. He is really PHA's eyes and ears on Capitol Hill and has helped us bring PH to the attention of Congress in a wide variety of ways, everything from making sure that pulmonary hypertension gets mentioned in the federal budget to helping us with our Capitol Hill days and our annual luncheon on the Hill. Our second presenter today, Carl Hicks, who is a member of PHA's board and longtime advocate, is unfortunately, as I mentioned, not going to be able to join us due to a last-minute emergency that he needed to step away from. But I'm excited that we have Diane Ramirez and Cindy Pickles, a couple of people on the call who have done district visits in the past, and I'm going to ask them to share a little bit about their experience and advice. So welcome, Gavin. I am going to turn it over to you right off just to talk a little bit more for us about the PH-specific bill in Congress and why this is such a good time to be making face-to-face visits with members of Congress.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I hope everybody can hear me okay. First off, apologies in advance if you hear a dog barking in the background. That's my dog. I just walked in the door, and my wife's been gone all day, so he's pretty fired up to see a human being.
Next time, send me a photo, Gavin, and I'll put him up on the slide.
Who knows? He may have something interesting to add. I don't know. But anyway, I had an opportunity. Katie mentioned Carl Hicks. I had an opportunity to have lunch with Carl today, and he sends his apologies to everybody for not being able to make the call. But I'm going to try to do my best to cover all the issues. And I think the first thing that I would say is, as we talk about the PH legislation, really the focus of the discussion tonight is trying to get additional co-sponsors for the bill, both in the House and the Senate. And really that's what we're encouraging everybody to do in the coming summer months. And the reason that we do this is because the summer is the time that members of Congress are back in their districts the most and are available to visit with folks in their district offices, or if you're able to swing it, they're able to come to support group meetings or other PHA functions, if they're invited and given a sufficient amount of lead time. So Congress is in session currently, and they're going to take a little break for the 4th of July. And they're going to be out for essentially the whole month of August. They might work a little bit that first week, but after that they're going to be gone the rest of the month of August and through Labor Day. So again, the point of these calls is to kind of tee people up to prepare for that summer recess and try to get in front of members of Congress and ask them to co-sponsor the PH bill. I know several folks on the call are familiar with the legislation, so I probably won't spend a lot of time going over it, but for those of you who are relatively new to this, we do have a bill that's been introduced in the House and the Senate fairly recently, and it's a good bipartisan bill that really tries to do two things, well, really three things. First off, it seeks to raise awareness of pulmonary hypertension and also expand research on the disease through the National Institutes of Health. And then secondly, as an organization, PHA recognizes the importance of raising awareness of the disease. We hear all too often stories of patients who have to go to multiple physicians before they get an accurate diagnosis, and that delay in diagnosis compromises their care and their outcome. So the legislation has a provision that would establish a grant program at the Centers for Disease Control with the sole purpose of educating the general public about pulmonary hypertension, about its symptoms, and about the treatment options that are available. And then finally, we have a provision in the bill that seeks to raise awareness among healthcare providers. And again, we're very familiar with stories of physicians who, for whatever reason, aren't able to accurately diagnose a patient simply because they don't have any real knowledge of pH. So the provision in the bill that we have in this area would establish a grant program at another federal healthcare agency called the Health Resources and Services Administration that would provide funds to educate physicians and really a whole slew of healthcare providers, nurse practitioners, primary care docs, pulmonologists, cardiologists, rheumatologists, anyone you can think of who possibly might come in contact with a pulmonary hypertension patient. And the other piece to that awareness initiative targeted at providers is making sure that they're aware of all the new therapies that are now available for the disease, all of the 9 and counting FDA-approved therapies that are on the market for PH. So we think it's a good bill. We think it's comprehensive, and it's bipartisan, as I'll talk about in a minute. I think one of the other important points to keep in mind about the legislation is that pretty much this identical bill passed the House of Representatives unanimously back at the end of 2008. And for those of you who have been doing this with us for a while, you'll remember that. It was a very nice accomplishment for the organization. Unfortunately, it passed, as I said, right at the end of 2008, around the elections in November, and we didn't have enough time to get it across the finish line in the Senate. So ever since that time, we've been back at it, trying to get the bill passed by both houses and down to the president. And this year in January, there was a new Congress that was sworn in, and that meant that we had to get the bill reintroduced. And as I mentioned, we did that just a few weeks ago. So that's a little background on the bill. The key players in the House, the sponsor of the bill in the House of Representatives is our friend Kevin Brady, Congressman Kevin Brady, who's a Republican from Texas, from the Houston area. He's joined again this year by Congresswoman Lois Capps, who's a Democrat from the Santa Barbara area in California. So Congressman Brady on the Republican side and Congresswoman Capps on the Democratic side are the main proponents of the bill in the House. Then in the Senate, we've been fortunate to be able to work closely with Senator Bob Casey from Pennsylvania, who's a Democrat. And I tell you, both of these, he's the sponsor of the bill in the Senate, and both Mr. Brady and Senator Casey have gotten involved in our cause because of patients like yourselves. We had a very courageous patient from Pennsylvania who came down to D.C. A year or two ago and made a very compelling case to Senator Casey as a constituent and got him to introduce the bill in the Senate. And Mr. Brady has a very good friend, Jack Stibbs, who some of you may know, whose daughter has pulmonary hypertension, and Jack's very involved in PHA, and it's because of that connection to the Stibbs family that Mr. Brady is involved. So the point is that the way that things happen, the way that good things happen with a bill like this is by constituents and patients talking to their members of Congress. And Mr. Brady and Senator Casey are two really good examples. So now that the bill is introduced, as I said earlier, the effort really now focuses on getting co-sponsors. And there are thousands of bills that are introduced every year in Congress, and most of them, quite frankly, go nowhere. They get introduced and they die in committee or don't even get a committee hearing. So we want to avoid that fate, and the way that you avoid that fate is you demonstrate to the committee chairman, the health committee chairman in the House and the Senate, that this bill has a lot of support by members of those chambers, and the way that we do that is we get members to co-sponsor the bill. And the best way to do that is for patients to make a personal appeal to their members of Congress. So that's why we focus on this this back home district visit campaign every summer, because it's one thing to go up to the Hill, myself and Katie, representing the organization. It's another thing if these members of Congress hear directly from their constituents and their patients back home. And I think that the success rate that we've experienced when patients go and meet with their members of Congress or their members of Congress's staff back home and tell their story and ask the member to co-sponsor the bill, the response rate is really overwhelmingly positive. And that's really for two reasons. Number one, members of Congress, they want to be responsive to their constituents. They appreciate the fact that you send them there. They want you to keep voting for them, so they want to be responsive. And number two, this is a pretty easy request, quite frankly. There's nothing particularly partisan at all about this bill. It's focused obviously on a very good issue and an issue where members of Congress can be helpful just by co-sponsoring. So, it's rare, I think, that we have a bad experience when, there's my dog, apologies. It's rare that we have a bad experience when our patients go and talk to their members of Congress. And the final thing that I would close with, and I'll mute my phone here so you don't have to listen to my dog. There's really only one thing you need to be good at to make a good congressional visit, and that's you got to be able to tell your story. When you go into these offices, to talk with a legislator or a staff person, they don't expect you to be an expert on this bill. They don't expect you to be an expert on the legislative process or how Congress works or doesn't work. Really what all they want to hear from you and expect you to do is tell your story, because the very high likelihood is that they have no idea what pulmonary hypertension is. So it's your job to educate them. It's your job to tell them what it's like to live with the disease or what it's like to care for a family member with the disease. And then, that's 80% of the meeting or more. And after you do that, simply say there's a way that you can help us, Congressman or Senator, and the way that you can help us is by co-sponsoring our pulmonary hypertension bill. And that's all you got to do. And again, I think if you're able to do that, I think the response you're going to get from your legislators is going to be overwhelmingly positive. So Katie, I'll stop there, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Thanks, Gavin. Does anybody on the phone have specific questions about the legislation or the key points that Gavin touched on before we go on to some more tips for having a successful visit?
Katie, this is Diane, and I do have a question for Gavin.
Sure.
Hi, Diane.
Hi, Gavin. How are you?
Good. Don't ask me anything hard.
I'll try not to. Well, yesterday I asked you a question about the billing, the bill and the wording and the money, and it dawned on me after the call was over. Since the bills they're kind of the same, but the House bill is asking for the money aspect. It's in the wording, and the Senate bill doesn't have the wording. What happens if both bill passes in each respective House? Do they still have to go to, like the House bill will have to go to the Senate to pass before it goes further and vice versa?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And, that's going to be a nice problem for us to have, if we're able to get it past one chamber and we have to send it to the other. But I think the higher likelihood, if I had to predict, and it's a good question, Diane, the higher likelihood is that if we're able to move the bill forward, the higher likelihood is that it's going to pass first in the House. And the reason for that is, number one, that's been the history of this bill. We've been able to get it passed in the House once before, as I mentioned. And number two, I'll just be frank with people, moving what they call a disease-specific bill like this forward is a bit more of a challenge in the Senate than in the House. And I won't bore you with the reasons for that unless you're interested, but that's just kind of the fact of the matter these days on the Hill. So I think that that bill as it's drafted in the House, which does include, as it's written now, specific funding levels for those activities that I talked about, that's probably the one that if we're successful is going to move forward. And then what will happen is if it passes the House, it'll be sent to the Senate, and the Senate's going to have to decide what they want to do. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's kind of the way I see it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it does answer my question. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Diane, while we have you on the phone, I'm going to call you up because I can sit here and talk about some of the things that we have learned over the years for making the best use of either a visit to your member's office or of inviting your member of Congress to your support group meeting. But you have done it a number of times, and I think it would be a lot more interesting if you would tell us a little bit of your story of how you got involved in advocacy and some of the standout moments that you have had from your visits that have made you realize how easy this can be.
Okay. Well, first of all, my name is Diane Ramirez. I'm in Lexington, North Carolina, and I basically was handed advocacy for my support group by Cindy Pickles, our support group leader. She asked me to attend a conference call, a webinar similar to what we're doing right now, and wanted me to get as much information as I could to get it back to her. And I did, and I just really got involved in the call. I learned a lot, and the next day I made a call to my representative, excuse me, and was able to speak to the district director, and within 2 weeks we were sitting with the district director talking about pulmonary hypertension, and there were a few patients there. And then I just got the fever, and I went from there. And we were able to reach out and connect with all of the reps in the state of North Carolina and both of our senators. And we did meetings here locally in the state, and we even did a trip up to Washington and met with some people there. And there have been a lot of different things that have happened. We've been able to, whenever we go, we always have like a little kit that PHA gives us, and it has all the information you need for pulmonary hypertension. But we always, we share our story. Anybody that's on a pump, be it Flolin or Remodulin or sub-Q Remodulin, I always ask them, bring some supplies, and, we show them what the pumps are, tell them the cost of the medication, and different things like that, and be really honest with them. And I love what Gavin said, that the only thing we have to be good at is telling our story, and it's the truth. We don't, I go with a lot of information because I just get like really nutty with it, but they just want to know, who we are and what's going on, and if there's a way they can help, and that's what we're there for. And my first meeting was with Senator Burr. And this was actually about 6 months before Cindy asked me to do the advocacy for our group. She asked me to just go to the meeting with them, and I had just started going to our support group meeting, and I got to Senator Burr's office a couple of minutes late. I was super nervous, didn't know what was going to happen, if I was going to have to talk. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, God, I hope you don't ask me any questions. And I looked down, and he's sitting behind his desk, and, very well dressed. And when I looked down in front of me, to the bottom of his desk, he had these beautiful shoes on and no socks. And it just dawned on me. It's like, oh, he's human. And it was just something that simple and little that I needed for it to click, that this is, yes, he's voted into the position that he's in, but he's human just like we are, and it was something that we all ended up talking about after the meeting. Did you notice he didn't have any socks on? And we kind of chuckled about it. And, there were other instances with other representatives where we've, they've looked at the pumps, and we had another senator that actually put a Remodulin pump around her waist and couldn't believe how heavy it was, and that patients have to walk around with this all the time. So having, your props, information on how many patients there are in the state, which you can get from the PHA, having other patients with you, if you can get, some people together. One of the things that I do is I have a list. I've gotten in contact with the other support group leaders in the state, and they've given me a list of the members of their groups, and I've gone through and marked off what districts they're in, so that when we go to see a specific representative, I can say, hey, you've got 18 patients in your district alone. And it just having that kind of information has helped. It's helped us a real lot when they see some numbers and they see people, and we explain what we're going through and and why we need the help that we need. And it's a wonderful experience. I love it. I was talking to Cindy earlier today. She asked me if I was going to make some calls and planning on doing any meetings, and I told her I was planning on making as many calls and setting up as many meetings as possible. That's just something that I like to do. I really enjoy the PH advocacy. It's something that has fit really well for me. One of the other things that we make a point to do is after the meeting, whether they decide to co-sponsor or not, is to, most of the time when we're in the car, before we leave, we'll fill out a thank you card and just get it right out to them. And what I've done is when we've gotten someone to agree to co-sponsor is then send them a thank you card with a PH ribbon, with a pin. The reps that you go and see, that your congressmen and congresswomen, they remember little things like that, and we take our pictures, and they like having their pictures taken for the most part. They're not going to say no. You send them a Christmas card, a thank you card with a little ribbon, and it's appreciated, and it goes a long way. There are a lot of little things like that you can do, that just make it all happen even faster. But overall, it's been a wonderful experience for me, and I'm looking forward to this season, so to speak, starting.
Thanks, Diane. I was thinking that you guys are always really good at sending us photos, which is great. Not only, it's great for the effort in a number of ways, and one of those ways is that we can actually put those photos on our website or in Pathlight and then send copies to the members of Congress to let them know that they're getting a little positive exposure for their co-sponsorship of our bill, which always goes a long way. So it's nice to have those. Cindy, I know that you are on the call too, keeping your piece in the background. Do you have anything else that you want to add to advocacy stories or tips and suggestions?
Well, it actually is a lot of fun. You get a group together, and it actually is a lot of fun. You laugh and tell stories. This is before you get there. Not during. But it's good interaction between the patients. And I think the funniest one we did was with the representative up in Asheville, North Carolina, who couldn't be there but made an appointment, and we did him by video conference.
Oh, I remember that. You sent me a photo of you guys with the video screen.
Yes, that was kind of funny, but it worked, so, that was fine.
Good. Thank you. So the next thing I want to say just a few words about is the resources that PHA has available to help you plan and prepare for your visits. As Gavin and Diane have both said, these visits should not be a big nervous thing for you. They should be fun. They should be relatively easy for you to do. And I and my colleague Elizabeth and all of the PHA staff are really here to make that as true as we possibly can. I think that the most important resource that is available to you as you prepare to invite a member of Congress to your support group meeting or to schedule a visit with them at their local office in your community is to pick up the phone and call Elizabeth or I. We are really here to help and love to talk about advocacy and about the visit process. Gavin is always available as well and happy to give his expertise. So don't hesitate to get in touch with any of us. I have put up some information related to the materials on our website as well. I think that probably the most helpful page on our website is the page that you see there in the middle, phassociation.org/advocacy/connect locally. And that's where you'll find a lot of materials, a sample script for scheduling a visit, a little sample thank you note, a copy of the bill itself. There are a lot of different materials related to making a visit that are available online, as well as just by calling the office and asking them for them. And then the piece that I haven't said a lot about, but I do like to mention, is that if getting involved in advocacy in any way, through visits or letters or phone calls, is something that you are interested in doing, we would love to have you as a member of the 435 campaign. And the 435 campaign has sort of a funny name. It is named after the number of members of the House of Representatives, and the goal is that we will have at least one member of the PH community, any connection to PH, in every single congressional district, building a relationship with their members of Congress and getting messages out to them on a regular basis about our PH legislation. So really easy to do if you are interested in advocacy and in sustaining that communication with your member of Congress. You just need to let me know that you're interested in being part of the 435 campaign. So I am going to stop there and just open it up to questions or additional comments if anybody has them.
Hey, Katie, this is Gavin. Just a couple of quick comments. I really like what Diane and Cindy had to say. It's right on point. And this should be fun, and it is fun. And let me tell you, there's a lot of issues and a lot of situations that you could find yourself in across the table from a member of Congress that aren't particularly enjoyable. But this is one that is. So I just want to reinforce that point, that they actually, these members and their staff, they actually do enjoy these types of meetings and discussions, and it's usually a very pleasant experience. And the other point I wanted to make, and I think this is important, is only good things can come from patients visiting with their legislators. And what I mean by that is, you're going to run into every now and again somebody who, for whatever reason, isn't able to support this bill. And that's fine. Everybody in office has to make decisions like that. And some are going to choose, for whatever reason, not to co-sponsor. But every visit that we make, and every visit that patients make, we're educating people about this very rare disease, which quite frankly people don't know as well as diabetes or heart disease or cancer or some of the major killers. And Katie and I work on a wide variety of issues on Capitol Hill and in the federal agencies. And what we've seen happen time and time again is that Diane or Cindy or others will go in and make a strong connection with the legislator, and most of the time they're going to co-sponsor our bill. But even if they don't, they are potential allies for us on a variety of other issues that we work on. And I won't go into all of those on this call, but we're actively working on a variety of things throughout the year. and people on the Hill who are educated about PH by patients and who are told by patients that, hey, you've got constituents in your district who have this disease and they care about these issues, they frequently work with us to advance some of these other things that we work on. So I would view the opportunity to meet with members of Congress not only as an opportunity to get them to support this bill, but keep in mind that you are positioning them as potentially a long-term ally for us on a wide variety of issues, and that too, I think, is very important.
Good advice. Thanks, Kevin. Does anybody else have questions or comments?
This is Erica.
Hey, Erica.
Hi. Are we trying to get a certain number of sponsors, or just as many as possible, or you know what I mean?
Yes, and
yeah,
Gavin, go for it.
Yeah, this is Gavin. I think the more the merrier is really the bottom line. There's no magic number. I wish there was, but there's no magic number that guarantees that the bill is going to move forward and get to a vote on the floor of the House or the Senate. I think that the closest that we get to magic numbers are 51 in the Senate, because that's a majority of 100 senators. And if you can demonstrate that 51 senators already support the bill because they're co-sponsors, that really helps. And then the same kind of holds true in the House. 218 members of the House represent 50% of the membership. So 50% plus one. So, those are very big numbers. They're difficult to reach, although I would tell you that back in 2008, when we, actually a little bit before that, but in the history of this bill, we have been able to get over 230 co-sponsors for the bill in the House. So I think that we want to get as many as we can. We don't want to set unrealistic expectations, but the more that we have, the better the likelihood that it's going to move forward. And I think maybe a better way to look at it is, what's sort of the minimum that we would need to get some traction and move forward. And I think the way that I would answer that question is 100 co-sponsors in the House, which I think is an eminently doable number for PHA, and 25 in the Senate. So that's a quarter of the Senate and roughly a quarter of the House. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and then, do you know how many there actually are right now? Because August isn't that far away.
Yeah. Well, the bill, as I mentioned, has just been introduced a few weeks ago, and we just got a handful right now, and that's not surprising because it's a new bill. And I think the way to look at this is the time frame that we have to move the legislation forward is really in the next year and a half. Okay. This bill is valid for the life of the 112th Congress, which is what we're in now, and the 112th Congress convened in January, and it's going to last until probably December of next year, November or December of next year, around the time of the presidential election. So between now and then is our window to get this thing passed and to get co-sponsors to help it get passed. And the bad news for us is that if we don't get it passed by the end of next year, we're going to find ourselves in the 113th Congress in January of 2013 having to get the bill reintroduced and kind of start the process all over again.
Okay. Thank you. Where can we get the ribbons and stuff that the lady was referring to as the little giveaway?
Erica, just give me a call. Especially, we have a number of materials at PHA that I can send you a little packet of information called a briefing book that has a copy of the bill and some information about PH that's background information so that when you have a meeting, you have something that you can hand over to the member of Congress or to the legislative staff person that you're meeting with, and don't have to worry about all of the nitty-gritty. You can really just focus on sharing your story, and I can also, I'm happy to send along pins and related things. So whenever you're setting out to schedule your meeting, just let us know and we'll make sure that you have materials.
Okay.
That reminded me of sort of a side note, but another tip for making a visit, which is that two things really. If you are inviting your senators or your representative to come and speak at your support group meeting, it is often very helpful if you can provide them with the dates of a few, 2 or 3 upcoming meetings, and allow them to choose the one that works best for their schedule. You're going to have a much higher likelihood of being able to get the member of Congress themselves to attend your meeting if you can give them a little bit of flexibility. But the other thing is that it's entirely possible, whether you invite a member to a meeting or whether you meet with them in their own office, that the person that you'll actually meet with is their health legislative assistant. And that is great. That's a great meeting to have. I heard someone once say that members of Congress have so much going on, so many pieces of legislation that they are trying to juggle that they can't always keep all the details of every piece of legislation in their heads. And so sometimes it can be really beneficial to speak with a staff member like a health legislative assistant, because their job is to focus on legislation like ours and to learn about the details and then to make a recommendation to their boss, the member of Congress, about what they should do. So whoever you end up speaking with, you'll still be able to have an equally powerful impact on the bill and on the cause. We have a few more minutes. I'm happy to take more questions if we have them. If not, I will wrap up with a couple of final pieces of information. You can find this recording, this e-learning event, on PHA's website in the PHA Classroom space after this call if you're interested in listening to it again, or better yet, sharing it with a friend, a fellow support group leader, whoever it may be. And our next PHA Classroom e-learning event is for newly diagnosed patients. So again, something that even if it's not specifically relevant to all of you on the call, you may know someone or want to share information about this call on your Facebook page, just sort of get the word out. So newly diagnosed, what you need to know, with special guest presenter Glenna Traeger, who is an RN. That's taking place on Tuesday, July 5th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And we want to always thank Actelion, Gilead, and United Therapeutics, who support the PHA Classroom with an unrestricted educational grant. With that, I want to thank Gavin again for being part of the call and sharing all of your legislative wisdom with us. And thanks to everybody for joining us tonight.
Thank you.